So in this section, we saw Bible references, a number, either paraphrased by Jerry or direct quotes that the reader is assumed to understand, and they deal with seeking God's kingdom over riches. There's a biblical command for humans and animals not to work on Sundays, and there are moral rewards for living according to the Bible. Remember, at the beginning of the section, the reader is sort of drawn in to support Jerry, and here is a good example of how the implied author has to do that. In chapter 36, Jerry is approached to ferry his best client, Mrs. Briggs, to church on Sundays. Jerry says no, and the result of that is actually that he loses this client. But in defense of his choice not to work on Sundays, Jerry says the following, and this conversation ensues. I won't read it all, I'll just pick out little bits. Year in and year out, not a day's rest, never a Sunday with my wife and children, and never able to go to place of worship. I read that God made man, and he made horses and all the other beasts. And as soon as he'd made them, he made a day of rest, and bade that all should rest one day in 7. I think, sir, he must have known what was good for them, and I am sure it is good for me. I'm stronger and healthier altogether now that I have a day of rest. The horses are fresh too, and do not wear up nearly so fast. The 6-day drivers all tell me the same, and I've laid more money in the savings bank than ever I did before. Somebody else says working men should stick to their Sundays, otherwise they'll have none left. By God's law, we have a day of rest, and by the law of England, we have a day of rest. So there's a conflation between the nation and between God's laws. Larry, who is not religious, says he doesn't believe in all of this. He doesn't think that religious people are any better. Jerry responds with a very practical solution that includes a biblical reference there, and saying that, there needs to be some practical sign that a person is religious. And then there is a bit that Jerry says that people really need to get to the bottom of this situation. And this is a very direct sort of social plea to deal with this issue of Sunday drivers and that. And he says, but if you Sunday drivers would all strike for a day of rest, the thing would be done. And then this is interesting. Larry says, and what would all the good people do if they could not get to their favorite preachers? Jerry says, 'tis not for me to lay down plans for other people, but if they can't walk so far, they can go to what is nearer. If a thing is right, it can be done, and if it is wrong, it can be done without. And a good man will find a way, and that is as true for us cabmen as it is for the churchgoers. You would have seen the repeated reference to good and what is good. And remember, at the beginning, once again, we saw Beauty introduce Jerry Barker as a good man, and everything gets weighted against that, what is good. And once again, the implied reader, so much is assumed of their knowledge of the Bible and their agreement with it. There are a number of Bible references for resting here again on the 7th day, and then an implied reward for obeying the Bible. And these biblical references add deistic weight to Christian practical living being extended to all classes and to all horses. So there we see the implied author's pressure to agree with this. She also, the implied author, provides a solution for both the working and the upper classes in this business of being able to work and get to church on Sundays. And she addresses the hypocrisy of the upper classes for asking lower class people and animals to work on Sundays in order to transport them to church. In chapter 37, Sewell provides an exception to the rule of this no work on Sunday rule. She does this sort of format a number of times throughout Black Beauty. And here she really shows her pragmatic approach. A woman falls ill on a Sunday. It's a lower class woman, it needs to be pointed out, or a working class woman, on a Sunday, and Jerry is called upon to help, and he does so. Polly, Jerry's wife, says, "But you know, we should do to other people as we would like them to do to us. And Jerry dear, I'm sure it won't break the Sabbath, for if pulling a poor beast or donkey out of a pit would not spoil the Sabbath, I'm quite sure taking poor Dinah would not." So here we saw further verses endorsing no work on Sundays, and a very clear biblical reference for when it is deemed right for work to take place on Sundays. There was the reason for it was there was a very moral reason for doing so. This is a particularly rational appeal to the implied reader, the Christian reader, to apply their Christianity rationally on a situation-by-situation basis. Interestingly, though, to end off, Sewell was not a socialist. She believed in social hierarchy, in paternalism, and we see this clearly throughout the text. Again, this assumption of social class. It was the duty of servants to serve masters, and so the duty of horses to serve humans. The opening, once again I refer to, Beauty says, "I never knew a better man than my new master, kind and good, as strong for the right as John Manley, and so good-tempered." Beauty doesn't question his role as servant beast. He just passes judgment on whether his master is good or bad. Sewell's Quaker Christianity, or Sewell the author, Sewell the implied author, is once more a huge influential factor in her belief in paternalism, and the implied reader is thus also conditioned into accepting traditional Christian paternalism. A text like James 3:3, although albeit taken out of context, provides an apt metaphor in closing. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal.
Animal rights and the work of animal rights activists, Peter Singer's Animal Liberation, published in 1975, is a cornerstone for modern-day animal rights philosophies. Peter Singer suggested a new ethic surrounding animals' ability to suffer and suggested the notion that there is no logical reason to differentiate between humans and animals ethically. Animal Liberation is the founding text relating to veganism and animal liberation as a whole, and Singer founded the phrase speciesism, relating to the unfair treatment of animals simply based upon the fact that they are not human. To research further into the link between racism and speciesism, I would suggest reading Race, Place and the Bounds of Humanity, a 1998 article by Glenn Elder, Jennifer Walsh and Jodie Emmel. The article talks at length about dehumanization and its role in violence towards animals and humans of subaltern origin. In addition to this, I would also recommend reading Racism, Speciesism and Suffering in Animals, Race and Multiculturalism by Luis Cordero Rodriguez and Les Mitchell in 2017. This article expands further upon Elder et al.'s points about dehumanization.